President Biden was on 60 Minutes last night. It was a wide-ranging interview. He was asked about his son, Hunter. Roll tape.
I love my son, number one. He fought an addiction problem. He overcame it. He wrote about it. And no, there's not a single thing that I've observed at all that would affect me or the United States relative to my son, Hunter.
All right. Miranda Devine joins us now. This is Miranda's story from day one. He's saying, look, Hunter had no influence on the decisions which the President of the United States made. Would you contest that?
Well, when you listen to him, because he's a practiced liar, what he actually said was that there's nothing that he's observed from his observation, from his vantage point, that would be a conflict of interest. Well, you know, he would say that, of course. So at least he was asked the question, but it was very light for the questions that need to be asked. Look, we don't know whether or not Joe Biden is compromised by the millions of dollars that flowed through to his family from China, for instance, and other countries. We don't know that. Only he can tell us that. I guess he's saying that from his point of view, there hasn't been any compromise, but I'm not sure that we should be taking his word for it.
You called him a proven liar. Miranda, that's a very, very strong expression to make about the President of the United States. Tell me an instance where he is a proven liar. Not spin, but an actual lie. Tell me.
Yes, actually a practiced liar. I think he's been doing it for a long time. But the evidence that I have from the laptop and from the testimony of Tony Bobulinski, Hunter Biden's former partner, is that Joe Biden told the American people that he knew nothing about his son Hunter's overseas business dealings. There's overwhelming evidence that he met with more than a dozen of those business partners. There's photographic evidence and other evidence.
Okay, we hear you and we understand that. Thanks very much. Now, you have an op-ed in the New York Post. The title is Seize the Border, GOP. You think the migrant crisis could be a winning issue for Republicans in the midterms? If so, what should be the strategy?
Well, yes, it is. Of course it is, because, there'd barely be an American who isn't appalled by the lawlessness at the southern border, the humanitarian catastrophe that's unfolded there, the emboldenment and enrichment of the criminal cartels who prey on some of the most vulnerable people in the world, and then the overrunning of the United States, and all done in secret, really. The media is not paying attention. And so we see last week with the Martha's Vineyard brouhaha how the national media can get all up in arms over 50 migrants, illegal migrants being shipped there by Ron DeSantis. And so what Stephen Miller, former Trump advisor and now heads up America First Legal, has come up with is this ingenious plan to focus the nation's media on the border crisis by getting the Republicans to put an amendment into the continuing resolution, the spending bill, short-term spending bill that will be going through Congress this month, append to it an amendment that stops any more funding for Joe Biden to be able to continue to release illegal aliens into the country. That would close the border, that would stop this border problem. They would have to deport illegal aliens one way or the other. And it would set up a showdown in Congress.
Yes, it would.
That the national media would have to pay attention to.
They would have to at that point. Miranda, thanks very much indeed. We'll see you again real soon.